Welcome to another special installment of Unraveling Religion. I'm your host, Joel Lessies, and I wanted to put together a roundtable discussion and assembled former guests of the show today. And we are joined by 5 panelists, and we're going to discuss today the topic, spirituality, what is it? So a kind of fundamental, basic, foundational question, which is simple and deep. And we have 5 guests here. So whoever would like to introduce themselves, please step up. Henry?
Well, I unmuted first, I guess.
Okay, go
Hi,
ahead,
everyone. My name is Sarah Hughes. I am a relationship artist in Rochester, New York, the unceded territory of the Seneca Nation of the Haudenosaunee people. And I'm excited to be here in conversation with all of you today. Thank you.
So since you mentioned me, I'm Henry Cretella. I'm retired. I used to work as a psychiatrist, and now I do spiritual guidance and teaching outside of Rochester. Most of it's online now. And podcasts. We have a podcast called Alchemical Dialogues that Joel has been a guest on. And I co-direct an educational spiritual organization called Amberlight International. So I'm really excited about this topic. That's something I've been thinking about for a while. So thank you for hosting this.
Who would like to go next?
Okay, I'll go. Hello, Rich Grego, former philosophy and cultural history professor at Southern New Hampshire University, now mostly retired philosopher and soldier of fortune, probably teaching at an educational institution near you, because I teach at various places online. So, and it's really an honor to be here with this esteemed company. I really is. I'm really enthused about being here.
Cool. Welcome, Rich. Welcome.
Hi, I'm Betty Scullin. Since I've retired from my past life, I'm an Akashic record consultant. So I help people journey in their Akashic records, and it's very spiritual related. I teach people how to access their records as well, and spend much time reading and meditating and playing with 3 young boys, which just brings so much love and spirit to my life. It's really quite a joy. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Joel.
Yeah, of course, Betty. Welcome. Welcome.
My name is Chris Barbera. I'm living in Buffalo, New York, Haudenosaunee land, Seneca territory, Great Lakes person. I've been working with a prison theology, encouraging people in prison to write about theology and their experience of God, perception of God. I've been doing that for quite a few years. And I also live at the Network of Religious Communities, which is located here in Buffalo, New York, which is an interfaith human rights organization of organizations. Different religious entities trying to find common ground. So a couple of the things that we work on are a spirituality and medicine program with UB Medical School, a food justice, hunger solutions, and just general like interfaith dialogues and events, as well as like hosting nonprofits that share here. So that's my present spiritual entity.
Cool. And I'm the host of Unraveling Religion, Joel Lessies, be the moderator today. I guess if there's maybe a participant, I don't know, we'll find out. Just, this question of spirituality, what is it, was really born out of my own investigations of spirituality. And just in talking with people on Unraveling Religion, the vastness of like perspective and experience and meaning that all that wrapped up together, how that shapes people in their lives and their intimate sacred relationship with something greater than themselves or not, to be, can take any form. And I was just wondering, spirituality, what is it?
Joel, I was thinking about that earlier, just before our call, and I was thinking about how my definition of spirituality has changed through the years. And this morning, when I sat to contemplate, what came to me was more a visual, that like the ocean is part of the earth, my spirit is part of my being, and like the oxygen is part of the air and part of the earth, my spirit is part of my being. So it's that aspect of myself that is etheric. It's the unseen aspect of myself, and we expand that. I know, but just from an individual perspective, that's what it means to me. And the more I realize and become aware of that aspect of myself, the more spiritual I realize we are.
Thank you for that, Betty. Yeah. Rumi says, Rumi's funny. He says, you're not a drop in the ocean in a drop.
All right, so I guess I'll jump in here too. I've been having a lot of conversations about spirituality, and it seems like every conversation leads to new kind of articulations that all are true. And that's, I think, what I'm learning most in considering spirit is the ways in which we limit the limitlessness and put containers around what is essentially an unbound oneness. It's more about peeling those back in a way and just remembering what we know, which is that there is no separation. All is one, our energy, our spirit, whatever you want to call it. The words are not enough, and it exists in relationship. One of the things that I saw recently that was so powerful, and I've seen it a few times, but every time it hits me hard, is there's a wonderful video of an experiment where strangers were encouraged to stare into each other's eyes for 4 minutes. So incredibly powerful in that they didn't even mess things up by starting to talk about it. Just have just look into someone's eyes and recognize you're not seeing a stranger. It's a face of you, and you're them, and sound like John Lennon. I am me and you are we.
Yeah, I was thinking of that. I'm the walrus.
Right. Like this, it's often much more capturable in other art forms than words. And
Yeah.
poetry comes the closest. That it just keeps hitting me over and over again. And whenever I start to believe I'm a separate self, experience and relationship snap me back.
I love that. I love that definition of spirituality. Well, since I spoke up, I mean, for me, I guess, and I'm certainly no expert in terms of referencing spiritual experience, but I think very much along the lines I think that you were expressing. When I think of spirituality, I think of a connection that we have as these embodied, limited, if you want, finite beings with some encompassing, transpersonal, transcendent, infinite ground of being. I guess you borrow a phrase from, I think, Paul Tillich, the theologian. And that, whereby I guess that relationship is not any sort of a dualistic, proprietary one where you can say, I know the truth, or I have mastered something that has put me in possession of truth, or this ground, this ultimate ground, but rather one in which you are in some radical sense at the disposal of that groundless ultimate ground and identify with it in a non-dualistic kind of a way. I don't know, I'm trying to think like well, every spiritual tradition, I don't need to tell you guys, you're probably more familiar with them than I am, and certainly in an immediate sense, but I'm thinking of like Tatwam Asi from the Vedanta tradition, that thou art, meaning we are, I think Aham Brahmasi is that I am Brahman, I am truth, I am that groundless being. And also in line with what you were saying, I think of that experience, while it's transcendent, simultaneously reconnecting us in a more vital, immediate, intuitive way with our grounded, finite being, such that we realize that in those times and those instances that we dwell in a sacred world, as limited and imperfect as it is. Heidegger, the philosopher, talks about being at home in the world. And I think when I've personally come as close as I can to having what I think is an authentic spiritual experience, I think of that. I think of the sense of being at home in the world. So I don't know. Does that resonate with anybody?
It's all resonating with me. It's interesting. So I got a little more analytical about it. And I think I see it as a process of connecting, developing meaning, and expressing. And it's almost like what's not spiritual. I used to compartmentalize it as if it was something, but it's hardwired, as far as I'm concerned, that I think there's a lot of evidence that we're endowed with it. It's a natural, whatever you want to call it, part of our being. The connecting, I used to think connecting was to a transcendent something, and that's half of it. It's connecting to a power greater than ourselves, but it's both in the heights and in the depths. There's a power greater than ourselves that I have in me, if I can find it, that's connect. So it's kind of like spirit is more transcendent and soul is more within me, and they're connected, but they're a little different. And I think that tension of opposites, sometimes it's more than a little difference, but that tension of opposites is what allows something to break through. And more, I think that becomes the meaning that we give to our lives. And that's probably, as many different meanings as there are human beings, and you could call it maybe your purpose or what's meaningful to you, and then the third part is how it gets expressed, that it doesn't stay compartmentalized, that it comes through either the work we do or the way we are. It just comes through our atmosphere, our being, the nature of who we are. It might have to do with our work. So the power isn't just up there, it's embodied in us and it's coming through all the time. So as I've grown older, it's become more grounded, more feminine, much more humanistic. Carl Rogers is my favorite influence that I have as a psychiatrist. So that's how I've been thinking about it lately.
Thank you so
Can I ask
much.
a follow-up question? Not to interrupt. I just curious. Is that something that you've used, or that an insight that, in a sense, you've used in or comes from your work?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a quick answer.
Okay.
Usually
Yeah.
I'm a lot more wordy than that. I mean, does that answer it? It came from the work I did as a psychiatrist and also the training I had as a spiritual guide, and integrating those things and just living. And yeah, and that's what I've been coming to. Lately, I got in, I'm studying with a friend, process theology, process philosophy. So trying to get through Alfred North Whitehead is going to give me a headache. So I've had to take a big break. But I think, when I thought about this the past couple of days, I forgot to include, I'm thinking, well, spirituality is a connection. spirituality is a process. It's always happening.
Mm.
It's never static. So I think of God. I try not to use the word God. So I think of that power that's greater than ourselves as a process. It's not static, and it's changing, and we're changing, and we're all moving in a direction. So maybe there was an initial impulse in a direction. So my tradition says love, harmony, and beauty. And we get off track and we go back on. We get off track and we get pulled back on. But I think that divine power, whatever we want to call it, is changing as much as we are. Or of the same thing as that power, the drop in the ocean. Well, I'm changing all the time. So why should that be still and static?
Yeah.
We're changing
Good question.
together, and it's just this amazing dance
It
that
really is. It really
has a
is.
direction. Yeah.
Chris, you grew up Catholic, didn't you?
Yeah. I guess, I mean, for me, spirituality is life. I mean, I don't really see a distinction between those two words. So I don't know if it's like I'm not uncovering or defining what is, because it just is. I guess my first instinct so it's for me, it's more of an expression. How do I express what is inherently within me? How do I express my life, which is my spirituality, rather than trying to define it? But I do also enjoy like I mean, I've had a lot of the people that you're mentioning, a lot of the ideas you're talking about are things I'm familiar with. And, I love having discussions about, dualism, non-dualism, and, all these kind of concepts, of course. But essentially it's spirituality is life. It just, so my first expression of that was when I saw suffering, to like a deep empathy with suffering, and to try to address suffering. I mean, my brother was born blind, so my first childhood thoughts were that it wasn't pity, but it was like this feeling of reaching out for this person, and mercy or love, concern. So then I just extended that to like people that have been suffering or oppressed, and now with people in prison, with racism and poverty, and war and things like that. So trying to connect with people who are suffering and address the root causes of that suffering, I guess, is how I try to express that. And maybe I'm ill prepared for this particular discussion today, because I've, in general, been moving into my body more than my head, or moving my head into my body. So it's more of a feeling of like when I was on the bus the other day, I just had this feeling of being connected, everybody on the bus. And it wasn't an idea or a concept, it was a feeling of like I am with everybody here. And it was maybe that's similar to being at peace in the world. Maybe it was something like that.
Yeah.
So
I like what you said, Chris, about expression of life, being spirituality, reaching out, and being, in my experience, the more I am in my body, as you were saying, then the better able I am to connect with other humans, sense that connection, and even communicate. Well, communicate on, I'll say, a vibrational level without words, and send thoughts, good thoughts, but anyway, thoughts. And I was thinking, when you talked about how expression is spirituality, thought about how some troubles for people, excuse me, begin when that expression is suppressed from the outside, and particularly if it's suppressed through violence, and how healing, whether we call it spiritual healing or psychological, emotional, is healing that wound, healing what occurred to stifle that expression.
That's been my profound direct thought, belief, and experience, Betty. I'm so glad that you just, sort of like express that, that's great. Because that has been part and parcel, a part of my spirituality has been suffering. And you too, Chris, what you express with as far as like suffering, but like memory and trauma is an impetus to examine. I'm in this human body. What is this? Right? Like, what's going on here?
Yeah, what you just said, Betty, really resonated with me as well. And the expression that you were talking about, Chris, and the reason I call myself a relationship artist is I want that framing in my mind all the time, that every connection with a so-called other is an opportunity to create space where we're at home in the world together, to use your phrasing, Rich, and that relationships are a form of art and a way to heal what has been ruptured or wounded or traumatized in others. I truly have a deep sense that there is no real other, and that we're all embodiments of we're facets of a multifaceted whole. And I can reflect back to people a loving, healing presence, or I can reflect back to them that which hurt them, or I can, but it's choices. It's got to be intentional. And I also have my own, oh, I have to be aware of the ways in which I'm reflecting my hurt out into the world. Like, one of the phrases I really love is that people can be very scary when they're scared, right? And hurt people, right? It's like oversimplifications of this concept that when we recognize our individual bodies have been through certain experiences, typically inflicted by those who were supposed to care for us, which is really, can mess with you on a deep level for a very long time and keep coming back over and over again. That there's practice and there's creation and art in consciously and intentionally seeking to love, and not in a passive, anemic way, but in an active choice to work with and for those that we are in relationship with. And that's not just relatives or friends or loved ones, but also folks that appear to be our opposition, folks that appear to be out to hurt us. If we can't understand what pain is driving that, then we are not going to get to a reconciliation and the level of peace and justice and love that we want. So it's like embodying compassion and being loving isn't just about seeing others as more broken than we are. It's seeing the brokenness of all of us in each other, and how do we actively heal one another in that space. It's been a challenge, I gotta say, because the last couple months I was tapped out. I had nothing. And the last few days I had really inspiring, incredible conversations, including this one, which it just, we all need that, interchange and expression and reception, the back and forth. And it's necessary. And an expression of spirituality that I hope, Chris, this is another way of saying some of the things that you were saying. You all are helping to shape the bigger picture, I guess.
I'm just curious, as long as go ahead. Go ahead, Henry.
I was going to agree with what you're all saying. The everything is a relationship. So my idea of process, making me think I should include that in my little analytical thinking. It's change, but it's change based on relationship, including my relationship with myself. And there was some interesting social psychology research I ran across that the default network that we use, so you can measure this neurologically on scans, has to do with relationship. So if you put somebody in a scanner and they veg out, the part of their brain that lights up is the part that has to do with their thinking about relationships.
Hmm.
And that's so important to us that it drives a lot of what we do. And I've had varying relationships with myself. I mean, and I still do. So I still have a part of me that's trying to find me. And, you know, I can have conversations with myself, like, I don't exactly know who's talking, but there's two people talking. There's a relationship. That's the process of change. I think it comes through relationships. So the mystical tradition I follow is primarily Sufi, but I've really integrated a lot of other things. So the saying that they have is that God created us. God so much wanted to be loved, wanted to be known, wanted to be loved, that he created us. It's a relationship. Sarah, one last thing, about the eye gaze. I can't remember the author of the book, but it was a book about, it was the secret practices of Rumi. And the whole point of the book was that practice. They're guessing that what happened was Rumi and Shams, his teacher, went into seclusion together. And it got all of his students pretty mad because he wouldn't talk to anybody. It was just him and Shams. And there's all sorts of rumors about what they were doing together and blah, 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 blah. And so this person's theory is they looked into each other's eyes.
Henry, you said something very important, which when you talking about different aspects of oneself, you're really talking about the rich inner life that we don't generally tend to. I mean, if you're an introvert, it's one thing, but like, it's kind of like a practice to go and know oneself inwardly. Yeah, there's a lot there, isn't there?
Ain't a psychiatrist for nothing. Yeah, I agree with you.
Oh yeah, no, I'm glad you preempted my probably fruitless question. Joel can attest that I'm a lost soul. So I figure every time I talk to him, and I'm doing it for therapy. This is like group therapy. I figure so I take advantage of that to ask you guys who I think have attained levels of spiritual evolution that I have not. I really mean this too. I sense a persistent theme, and again in the all the great world literature, the spiritual literature and so forth, there seems to be one persistent theme of sort of fallenness. I guess that right, at least that's the concept from the Judeo-Christian tradition, I guess, right, and maybe Islamic tradition as well. It's fallenness, a sense of separation from our source, or our this ground of being, if you want to call it that, or God, or Brahman, or whatever. I also sense from you guys seem to be talking a lot about experiences of suffering and repression. I guess I'm just curious, coming from all the places that you guys are coming from. So what is it that keeps me from feeling at home in the world? Is there some universal human condition whereby we need this healing process that you've all seemed to be touching on in a lot of respects? What do you think? What is it that's separating us from where we're supposed to be? I don't know. Chris may not think there's any such thing of where we're supposed to be. What do you think? I'm anxious for salvation. So,
well, I go to Joel, my master, usually for salvation, but
Oh my Lord.
yeah, I came across relational theology recently in response to what Henry was talking about, and similar to that, the process theology he was talking about. And one thing I found in my expression of spirituality is that taking this kind of esoteric philosophical discussion that we're having, and these ideas of what is the spirit, and what is life, and who am I, and these fundamental questions, but then couching them in like within the realm of justice or suffering, or like action in the world, so that it goes from the realm of just so it's the implementation of the idea, or the in a way of expressing that reality. So in a sense, like the missing link between what we think and what we do, and trying to seamlessly bridge that. So that's one way I understand the relational aspect of it. And there could be like, are we relating to the God within us? Are we relating to the God within others? Is there actually a difference between those two things? Those are interesting questions as well. Then one final note about that in terms of like my personal, and Sarah's talking about like a universal spirituality, which I agree with, but I also believe that there's like, we all have our like individuality, like there is an individuated soul that only this individuated soul can articulate it or express it in this particular way, even though we all share like some kind of common spiritual reality. So we do that kind of I don't want to say privilege or duty, but like that kind of like that's our action in the world, however we define action. So my particular individuated action, I suppose, would be in recent times anyways, is trying to live in a very minimal, sustainable kind of way. Because one way I articulate spirituality as well is like that which it is not. And so I don't believe that like the mass consumption militarism of the world is really spiritual, or it's kind of destructive. I kind of define it in that, maybe that gets into ethics, where that which is creative and that which is destructive, and making a distinction between the two. And so I try to be more in the positive creative realm, and to eliminate or put the destructive aspects. And then that's the question of is ethics primarily spiritual? But so I guess my final thought would be in my particular avenue is like living in a very sustainable, minimal kind of spiritual way, in the sense of like being outside of everything that I consider destructive, and focusing on this intersection between like esoteric, very physical, like suffering, like in terms of prison. Like, so my last expression of in writing was relational theology, in relational prison theology, taking the captivity, but can there be a relationship within captivity, and then you get into, Joel and I have discussed a lot of the logotherapy.
I'm so glad you brought that up, Chris, the question of ethics and spirituality. And, I wanted to ask Betty, because I know Betty is a practitioner, someone who accesses Akashic record for people. And I know her as a friend, her own personal ethic. I was wondering, what are your thoughts about the ethics of spirituality, or the spirituality of ethics, Betty?
Yeah, Chris, I actually started to feel about it when you were speaking. I agree and relate to your thoughts about our being one, and yet also individual aspects of that oneness. Ethics, in terms of the work I do with Akashic Records, I define ethics as being very respectful of boundaries, first of all. And part of that is because of my individuality and the fact that I want to do this work with integrity. But also that's what, when I access someone's records, I'm not working alone. I'm a facilitator. I am accessing information that is beyond me. It would be, I describe it as illuminated souls who collaborate with all of us, collaborate with us to express and on behalf of humanity. First of all, respecting a person's boundaries in terms of not giving them information they're not ready for, not shining the light when they're not ready for it. So I pay very close attention to what comes through me, through my heart. This relates to how I would want to respond to Rich as well. I'm very focused on what's coming through my heart, not my mind. So my mind is a tool so that I can express what's coming through on a vibrational level. I sense information. I'll receive pictures possibly, And it's a sensing from that being and sensing that person's beingness and relating to that person verbally what is coming through. And so my prayer when I work with someone is that everything that comes through is for their highest good, and that I am as clear and clean a vessel for that information to flow through. And of course, confidentiality is part of that whole package in terms of the ethics involved, not hurting someone. Yeah, in terms of being at home in the world, I have so often felt like an alien here.
Yeah.
I really thought that I was from another planet. When I was younger, I really believed that. I mean, I had no trouble believing that people from other worlds lived here because I thought I was one of them. But that's because I felt so different, so foreign, so alien, and alienated in some regards. When I'm at home in the world, it's when I'm in my heart. It's a feeling. It's not a thinking aspect of my being, but it's a feeling. And I purposefully use prayers and practices, breathing, meditation, and also certain mantras, which help me to expand and strengthen my heart center. And that is how I can relate better to other people on the heart level, not on my mind level.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm loving this conversation so much. Okay. Rich, you asked a direct question. I think that one of the challenges that we have is the idea of damnation and salvation to start with, right? That's a construction that has been used to and abused in ways to control people, right? So one of my biggest issues with religion in general as a concept is that typically it's taking these really beautiful ideas and feelings and experiences and manipulating them in ways that are intended to aggregate power unequally. And then it becomes structures, institutions, and it becomes a thing that we can't question because it's powerful on a top-down, we can punish you level versus being powerful on a yes, that resonates with my heart level, right? And I grew up in a family where religion was not practiced at all because both of my parents were harmed in their religious traditions, and my mother was excommunicated and she married a Jew, and a non-practicing Jewish man whose ancestors were Jewish, but his family gave up religion because the Holocaust and the trauma and all the things, and they just clean slated it and acted like it never happened. But certain other parts of the family still practiced, but we were deprived of all outside religious dogma or practice or expectation, which in a way I'm really grateful for, because I don't feel like I had to unlearn specific dogma, but then I was just a curious person and I read a ton, and you could almost not read anything without there being some reference to God or church or some kind of practice. And are you there, God? It's me, Margaret, Judy Bloom, all of that, but it was not imposed on me, I guess. So that made me curious. And I started reading the Bible as literature. And I thought to myself, these are stories, it's narrative. I feel like we as humans, the story can drive a lot of constructed reality, right? And I saw alternative stories that weren't being amplified and they weren't being created into, top-down structures of power. And I thought, that feels real to me, but why isn't there a church of this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I guess, I don't know. My salvation, what I consider my salvation, is probably not having to unlearn so much, right? Doesn't mean I'm not tormented all the time by, am I making good choices? Am I acting ethically? Because so many times the things that I thought were the right thing turned out not to be, and I learned I was doing harm that I didn't intend to do. And then I had to reckon with the impact of that. But I'm in a system that is harmful, and I can't lend my strength to that system anymore. And how do I mitigate the damage of leaving that system because I have relationships in there, right? So
Mm.
that's where I go to. It's like who do I really care about? Who am I in relationship with directly where my decision is going to impact them? And how do I think that through, not to get completely, analysis paralysis is a real thing, can be, but feeling, thinking, being all at the same time, and get myself to right relationship. But anyway, the point is that, like, once you get to the place of understanding right relationship based on the experience of relationship, and like you can see it when your relationships have positive impact on someone. And like to Betty's point, you can also tell when something you're about to say is going to hurt someone. You can. There are ways to be honest that are also compassionate and loving.
Mm.
And I want to be in a place where it's a co-created, co-learning experience, because young people have less to unlearn than most of us older folks. And we can really learn a lot from how close they are to their actual emotional experience. There's nothing immature or wrong with that, in my opinion. They need guidance and support. But I mean, I feel like looking at young people and being in relationship with young people, all ages of young people, from toddler on up, is a great way to reconnect with the part of ourselves that knows precisely who we are and what we're here for.
Wow, this is fantastic. I'd have to pay $300 to get this. And I mean, seriously, one of the things I really love about this is, first of all, because really I look up, I figured this is going to be a panel of people who are completely in a constant state of contented ecstasis in union with the divine, and you all seem to be actually struggling. So this makes me feel good. I'm not that far gone, I guess, if you're still evolving. But also, I really appreciate these ideas about how seems a lot seems to have a lot to do with reconnecting to something essential. Well, I guess that's what certainly Carl Rogers or Abe Maslow would certainly say, right? Henry, and actually, you're the psychiatrist is the only one. So if I came to you and asked you, what's wrong with me? What do I need to do to be at home in the world? Would you echo the sentiments of that you've heard so far? Or would you, like probably most of your peers, give me some exotic drug to take to alter my brain chemistry in just the right way?
The first thing I'd say is I'm retired and I'm not practicing anymore. So
okay, fair enough.
It makes it easy. But look at, there was I love everything that's being said, and we're also, it seems like we approach it different ways through who we are. And so I was listening to a book, and it's Robert Thurman, so that's tough for me just listening to him because I can't keep it in my mind, and I can't remember the name of the book now, but it's his latest one. And he's talking about the Eightfold Path, but he puts his own, the Buddhist Eightfold Path, so he puts his own twist on it. The part that came through that I'm remembering is he said when he started, his fantasy was all he wanted to do was meditate. And that's, he wanted to go to a monastery, and he had the person that he took refuge with kept interrupting him. And there'd be a knock on the door and he'd say, "Bob, what are you doing?" And Thurman would say, "Rinpoche, I'm meditating." "Oh, let's go have a cup of tea." And he just kept interrupting him, and it was pissing him off. Eventually, and the Rinpoche wouldn't let him become a monk. And eventually he got worn down, and I think he went to the Dalai Lama, who did make him a monk. And then he discovered, oh, my Rinpoche was right. I'm not a monk type. That's not me. And so the closest he could come and live in the world was to go become a university professor, which I think is a riot. The first part of the path is wisdom. The last part of the path is meditation that it built. I mean, it's never strictly linear. it's always spiral, and you start where you are and all of that stuff. Right view, right intentions. Then, interestingly enough, comes ethics. And then right speech, right action, right livelihood. And then you go meditate. It's effort, mindfulness, and concentration. So it just struck me, because sometimes I think, well, I get in my head a lot, and it's being grounded in an understanding. And again, for me, it's become more and more of an understanding of connectedness above and in me and with everyone. It's having an understanding about that. And from that, it inspires the actions. And or it gives more meaning to the actions, but they become so much more meaningful. So Sarah, you started by saying when it's done intentionally. Yeah, it's kind of like, oh, that's what I'm doing. And so I'm a storyteller. I love reading biographies. And I thought this was great. I get to be like, you tease psychiatrists by saying they're a voyeur. Because we are. You take peeks into everybody's life, right? And I thought, wow, it's an art more than a science, and I can be with people for an extended period of time, and I can be really helpful, and I can hear stories. And I realized that part of the power that comes is also the attitude you have when you're prescribing. So I started my more intensive kind of involvement in my mystical path. And then, I'm a Carl Rogers person, and I saw how they were all starting to come together.